Hello, everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni, and I'm here from the Healey Center with Catherine Small, our patient navigator, and Mimi, our administrative assistant. Thank you so much for bringing the webinar to us with your assistance, Mimi. Thank you again. And we are letting people in from the audience. Thank you for joining us. This is our EAP webinar that we do once a month, and the other webinar we do is about the platform trial. But for today, we'll talk about EAPs. And as we are waiting for people to join, I do want to point out that we have a wonderful QR code on the first slide. And if you would like to scan it, if you're not on our ALS link, please do so now or later when you see the recordings or download the slides. This QR code and the link is for everyone who is interested in news from our center. That's the way to receive our newsletter. So thank you so much again for participating, and we can go to the next slide. So as we provide updates about expanded access, I wanted to share a presentation that I actually gave at the NILS Consortium meeting that happened about a month ago. And I know that the meeting was live streamed, but in case you missed that, I wanted to provide the same content that we shared at the NILS meeting. In fact, at the NILS meeting, we have one entire session dedicated to expanded access. And that was led by our colleagues, Dr. Suma Babu and Dr. Bjorn Orskarsson, and a few other people in addition to me presented as panelists. So I presented on the Trehalose EAP, and my colleagues presented on other programs, including the Ibudilast EAP, as well as tofersen EAPs that preceded essentially the approval of tofersen, or it was at the time when tofersen was just approved and not available yet as a commercial product for SOD1 associated ALS. And so the Trehalose EAP is the first EAP that was funded by the NIH thanks to funding from the Act for ALS. And so that was the first grant that we received in 2022, sort of when the Act for ALS law was implemented. And so we were very excited to be the first to receive that funding. And now the project is essentially in the final stages of completion. And there's different aspects to this. So I thought I would just present, again, the same content that was presented at the scientific conference so that, everyone, could be up to date in terms of where we stand with this particular program. Next slide. So to go back in time to 2022, at that time, my colleagues, Dr. Babu, Dr. Barry, and myself were the first multi-PIs to receive funding from the NIH under the Act for ALS. Per the law, the EAP had to occur in parallel to an efficacy trial, and that was the case at the time. At the time, Trehalose was being tested in an efficacy trial that was known as Regimen E of the Healey ALS platform trial. And by definition, as an EAP, the EAP could not interfere with the conduct of the clinical trial itself. So it was for a very different patient population. In other words, at the time, there were two paths to receiving Trehalose, either in the context of Regimen E or the Healey ALS platform trial that was ongoing at the time, or for people who were not eligible for the trial itself, the EAP provided access to the drug. And again, all of this was, sort of following the law in compliance to the law and the grant instructions. This particular drug, Trehalose, is to be delivered via weekly intravenous infusion. And so it was important for us, for people participating in the EAP, to be able to deliver that in the participants' homes. So it was really a big infrastructure build to make that available to people that were not eligible for the trial, including some people who were at advanced stages of ALS disease progression. As some of you know, if you're familiar with the Act for ALS, the law actually allows EAPs to happen, funded by federal funding. And the funds are actually given not only to have people access the drug, but first and foremost for research. So essentially, the grant was given to meet some overarching study goals, which was to provide access to Trehalose as part of the EAP, but also to gather research data that could supplement the findings from the efficacy trial that was ongoing at the time. And specifically, we outlined a few research objectives, which were to generate safety data or clinical data from a broad population that, again, as I said, was not eligible for clinical trials, and also to gather additional biomarker data. In particular, we wanted to test the effect of the drug on neurofilament levels, because that's an important biomarker for ALS. We also wanted to evaluate the clinical effects of Trehalose and compare it to historical controls. There's a lot of interest in the field of ALS in terms of comparing what we see in an actual population of people participating in a research study, and then compare it to historical controls. Is there anything that we can learn from that experience? And the statistical models for doing that are not trivial, actually. So we had to do a lot of thinking and development to be able to develop those models. So the grant was submitted with the goal of enrolling 70 participants at up to 25 sites across the US. Again, with this complex infrastructure, that was not just clinical care, because, again, there was, the need to deliver weekly intravenous infusions in the participants' homes, but also the research infrastructure that went with it. So that's kind of the goal of the grant in alignment with the law. Next slide. And so just to really provide a snapshot from sort of the beginning to the end of this study, we got the grant at the end of September 2022. We started enrolling participants, so receiving infusions in March of 2023. And then at the time, again, the same drug was being tested in the Healey ALS platform trial. So what happened was that because this EAP happened in parallel to the efficacy trial, once the efficacy trial was completed and the drug was found to be not effective at slowing down ALS disease progression, by definition, the EAP was stopped. This was actually something that we knew could happen. In other words, the idea was, as stated in the law, the EAP will occur in parallel to the efficacy trial. If the efficacy trial is positive, obviously, hopefully, there's a way to continue the EAP. But if the efficacy trial is negative, then we need to stop the EAP as well, because there's no point in giving the drug to the EAP, because the clinical trial had negative results. Unfortunately, in this case of Trehalose, the trial had negative results. And for that reason, in March of 2024, the EAP itself was stopped based on the results of the efficacy trial. By that time, though, we had enrolled all participants. All participants have been enrolled in the first year. And again, unfortunately, we had to stop the infusions for participants because, again, at that time, the clinical trial was negative. All of this has been described in a paper. You can find the link to the paper by using the QR code that's on the slide. And also, thank you, Catherine, for posting the link into the chat. So essentially, we want to provide all the information to everyone who may be interested. And the article is available in Muscle and Nerve using the open access mechanism. So everyone can read all the details, including the main paper and the supplementary information that includes additional details. And so after the actual clinical study ended, we still had work to do. In fact, we are wrapping it up right now, because the important part of these EAPs that are federally funded, one of the important parts, in addition to giving access to drugs, is that they are also a mechanism to inform research, to inform the entire field, and find new ways to address ALS, not only for the people who actually participated in the research itself, in the study, but also as a way to gather new knowledge and contribute to ALS drug development in general for everyone else. And so since the ending of the actual infusion period, basically our team has been working hard on doing additional analysis, and I'm gonna go and describe those soon. But again, the original set of goals was met and was published open access. And again, you can read the details in the paper. And so if we go next, I want to briefly share again what the findings were. So first of all, important point, EAPs are for people who are not eligible for clinical trials. That the reasons for not being eligible for clinical trials can be several, including long disease duration and or advanced stage. And so I don't have all the detailed data, although they are all available in the paper here on the slide, but just to focus on a few important issues. Like if you look at the table kind of in green, at the top, you can see that there was a relatively large percentage of people with bulbar onset. Sometimes people with bulbar onset have a harder time enrolling in clinical trials because they may have for different reasons, they may have difficulties performing the vital capacity maneuver. And so in this case, again, we have many more people than usual participate with bulbar onset. Many people have had participants in the study had very long disease duration. Just to give you a sense that if you look at the second line where it says time since ALS symptom onset, the mean number of months since symptom onset was over 44, almost 45 months. And you know, as most of you know, that most clinical trials only accept participants who are within 24 months from the initial onset of the disease. And in this EAP, again, it was mostly people who had very long disease onset, almost 45 months, very long time since disease onset that participated, almost 45 months. In addition, if you look at other functional scores, for example, ALS-FRSR at baseline or use of BiPAP or non-invasive ventilation, again, those numbers point to the fact that it was a group of participants that normally would have not been able to participate in clinical trials. And that's exactly why the EAP was set up, to allow those people who cannot participate in clinical trials an opportunity to participate in research and have access to the drug. Now, we enrolled all the 70 people that were supposed to be enrolled. Now, most people actually that completed the study, the 6 months of treatment before the discontinuation of the protocol, were able to do that. Most people that terminated from the protocol actually terminated because we had to stop the protocol, as I said earlier, because the parent study, the efficacy study, was stopped. If you can click a couple of times, you'll see other text popping up. Sorry, back one, thank you. So in terms of the study results, important points here, we were looking at safety of the drug. There were no new safety signals that were identified, so that's good news. We looked at the effect of the drug on neurofilament levels, and actually the neurofilament levels stayed exactly the same, exactly flat in the participants, which also kind of as a signal, you know, that's consistent with the fact that the drug doesn't work. Now, having this type of NFL analysis in patients who are normally not enrolled in clinical trials adds to our understanding of the behavior of neurofilament levels in an EAP population, which normally is studied less often than a clinical trial population. We also did something very complex called propensity score matching analysis using data from a different study called Answer ALS. And essentially, what this means is that we looked at the clinical outcomes, such as, for example, functional rating scale scores, ALS-FRSR total scores, and survival over the study period. And we compare the data in the participants in this particular EAP, and we compare them to historical controls. Specifically, in this case, we compare them to the Answer ALS dataset. And this is a sort of a complex type of analysis that, again, was developed for this study to try to see, you know, what we can learn in terms of the clinical efficacy when you compare data from an actual study to data from historical controls, which is something that's of interest in the field. Unfortunately, for this particular drug, there was no benefit of Trehalose compared to historical controls. Again, all the data are consistent here in the EAP and also in the efficacy trial, pointing, unfortunately, to the lack of efficacy of Trehalose. So this is obviously disappointing for the drug itself, and that's definitely not the result that we were hoping to get. However, we learned a lot in this study, and specifically, in addition to what I've just presented, we're still learning, actually. So I do want to thank all the participants who gave their time and samples to participate in this study, because we are still learning from their participation. And in fact, the learnings extend far beyond the walls of this particular study, and they're now helping with biomarker analysis in collaboration with many partners to be able to learn more about ALS, because ultimately the participation of these people in the EAP is helping the entire field. So if we can go to the next slide, a few kind of details about how that's happening. So first of all participants provided serum samples, so that they underwent blood draws for us to collect serum samples, both when they enrolled, the baseline, and also over time. A few hundred samples were collected, and some of them were used for the neurofilament level testing that I just mentioned. But then there were there were hundreds of samples, almost 500 samples that have been used for biomarker projects. And in addition to that, we have almost 300 samples that are still available and were donated for future research. All of the data, all of the samples are available for open access. So in particular, all the data have been deposited both in PROACT, which is a clinical trial database, and the ALS Knowledge Portal, which is an incredibly important website and database that's maintained by the NIH and is collecting data from a number of important projects that are being funded by the NIH via the Act for ALS. So not just this EAP, but also other EAPs, and also an important natural history and biomarker study known as All ALS. So again, I want to emphasize that while this was the first grant that was given by the NIH thanks to the Act for ALS, after this, there were more grants, both EAP grants and also All ALS. All the data that's been collected, that was collected in the Trehalose EAP, and that was collected subsequently in the other studies, all of this was or will be, depending on the timing, deposited into the ALS Knowledge Portal, which is incredibly important because all of this becomes a very rich resource for the field for investigators to do more analysis. In particular, the samples that were collected are, they were all donated to a public biorepository so that other people can do research, and all the biomarker data that have been generated, and some of them were in the process of finishing the analysis, also will be collected and shared through the ALS Knowledge Portal. And that's very important, so that it's not just clinical data, but it's also a lot of rich biomarker data that will all be harmonized and aggregated, so that by combining data from multiple studies, we can really begin to answer more questions about ALS. I really want to emphasize the importance of biomarker research, and especially biomarker research that's not done in a silo, but it's done collaboratively. And the NIH is really spearheading this research. It's really transformative, because all of these different groups, not just our group, not just my project, but many other people's projects, everything is being harmonized and aggregated so that we can learn faster. And we do have some webinars that we had on this series to explain the importance of biomarker research. I also want to suggest that if you're interested to learn more about All ALS, a very important biomarker study that's also feeding information into the ALS Knowledge Portal. So next slide. And so which projects specifically are we doing? So for using the samples that were collected in the Trehalose EAP study, in addition to that, using samples from Answer ALS, which is a previous study, and also All ALS, which is an NIH funded study, we're doing a lot of research in collaboration with all the people that you see listed on the slide here, including some commercial vendors such as ICON, as well as academic partners such as colleagues at the Broad Institute or Johns Hopkins, and a few other companies listed here. So we are doing biomarker analysis, including metabolomics, including proteomics, and including testing new exciting markers such as scripting exons. So again, a lot of these that has been completed to some extent in some of the samples. We're finishing the analysis right now. And by next summer, we'll deposit all the results again in the ALS Knowledge Portal. So lots of work that's going on to really support this very collaborative science. Next slide. And so to conclude, the Trehalose EAP was the first grant that was funded by the Act for ALS. It was conducted in parallel to an efficacy trial. And the people who participated in the EAP were not eligible for the trial itself. In addition to supporting participation, the funding allowed us to do a lot of research on the drug itself, but also beyond the drug itself. And all the data has been deposited into PROACT and the ALS Knowledge Portal. Some additional biomarker data that is being generated right now will also be deposited as soon as possible. And additional samples that were left are donated for research from other people, so that if other people have ideas, they can also test these samples and do additional research. All of this is being published, and again, you can find all the details in our articles, and also the database is available for the public to mine and share. So just wanted to kind of provide sort of a one concise presentation about the results of the Trehalose EAP, more to come on the biomarker analysis, and I'm very happy that all of this is done in collaboration with the NIH and many other colleagues to be able to share data and learn about ALS in a collaborative way. So if we can go to the next slide, I do want to mention that all of this was made possible by a very dedicated study team, including staff at the coordination center at both MGH and BNI, and also fantastic sites. We're going to include 25 sites, but in the end, 21 sites enrolled participants. Really want to thank all the sites, the PIs, the investigators listed here, as well as their staff for allowing this opportunity at their site. And then if we can go to the next slide, I do want to mention that we want to continue to bring information to you about EAPs. So please check out our website. We have a lot of news and kind of frequently asked questions. A lot of this content was developed in partnership with our Healey EAP Patient Advisory Committee. So thank you so much to all of you who have been giving us your time to make sure that we can share relevant information with the community in a way that's intuitive, hopefully. And obviously, if you have any comments or feedback, please let us know. And the last slide I want to share here, the most important slide. Catherine, do you want to tell us about the plan for the next few webinars?
Sure. So for those of you who can't get enough of us, I don't blame you. We're here twice a month, and we have our next webinar shifted up a week. So rather than hosting on the fourth Thursday of the month, giving people a break for Thanksgiving, we're going to be having a webinar next week. So back-to-back feature. Next week, we'll be talking about the Healey ALS platform trial. And then back to our usual programming, the second week of December on the 11th is going to be our next expanded access webinar. So please continue to join us if you like tuning in. We like having you here.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Catherine, for all the work you're doing to prepare these webinars and then make sure that, we post the recordings, etc. There's a whole team working on these behind the scenes to bring information to everyone. So I see one question in the Q&A chat, and great question. Will there be an EAP for the next regimen of the platform trial, the Horizon regimen testing NUZ001? So, well, I surely hope that that will be the case. So we are working to start the Horizon regimen in very early in 2026, and I really hope that will be soon followed by an EAP. More to come on that as soon as final plans are, finalized. We'll let you know, and definitely we love working with companies and bring new EAPs to the field. So let's see if we can do that soon in 2026. And Catherine, any questions that you've heard?
I know there's nothing in the chat, so if people have questions, please submit them. But I have gotten some questions from people asking, there's a lot of interest in expanding expanded access programs even further. And somebody asked me, are there other avenues beyond grant funding for these types of programs? What are the avenues to expand these types of opportunities?
Yeah, no, that's an important question. So I would say that definitely NIH funding has been the game changer here, in the sense that has allowed these larger EAPs. I mean, I wish they could be even larger, but to the extent possible, the NIH has allowed these large EAPs to happen. I will say these are not the only EAPs that are available at our site and a few other sites, thanks to the generous donation from different foundations, group patients. We and others have been able to do small EAPs. And so definitely the importance of philanthropy and donations and fundraising is still there because that allows smaller programs to still exist. And so that's through, again, a smaller location, smaller sites, but it can be for smaller programs, it can be for programs that are not eligible for NIH funding for a variety of reasons. And so I do think the importance of the patient community fundraising for these EAPs is still very much a real thing. Yeah. So there's a good question about, can these EAP programs reach patients abroad? So first of all, it is possible for people to set up EAPs in different countries, but there are country-specific regulations. So if people are located in a different region, obviously they can talk to their physicians to see if they might be able to set up specifically an EAP in that particular region. In terms of the EAPs that we are managing, that presented and other EAPs that are ongoing, if people are patients at the participating site in the US, then they can participate. There is some travel involved because people need to be able to go to the site and be seen to participate in the EAP. And so if that's true, I mean, again, patients don't have to reside necessarily in the US, but they have to go to the site for the visits.
And I'll add, I think the person who asked that question lives in France. So I don't know, Dr. Paganoni, if you have specific advice for someone with questions about EAPs if they live in France.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the regulatory landscape in France about this. I think there are some, I kind of remember there are some pathways in France. I remember that from a different program. I think it has a slightly different name, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure about it, but sure about the right name or the regulatory path. But your doctors in France should be able to look into this. They can always contact the pharmaceutical company. They can always try to set one up in France based on local regulations. But again, if people want to travel to the United States and be seen as a patient in an ALS clinic here, in theory they can participate. The only thing is that again that there is some travel involved. And I see here that you are Italian. Thank you for the follow-up comment. I believe that there are compassionate use programs in Italy as well. So again, there are different options, but there's always the option to travel here. If although I understand it's difficult. So I don't see any other questions. So thank you again, everyone, for participating, and I think we'll see you next week for the platform trial webinar. Thank you again. Thank you.